Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I'm always grateful. We had an exciting weekend. I hope you did too. We had plenty of rain. At one point I thought we were going to be submerged, but I'll come back to that in a moment. My macro thoughts start with crude oil, which has been spiked a lot higher this morning. And I'll come back to my thinking around that, but I think it's a big sell. I sold Brent crude oil at $46.20. Home thoughts. I love this photograph from David Yarrow. My goal was to capture a rhino charging towards the camera in its casing. They should be menacing proximity, and indeed there certainly is. And then this tweet caught my attention from a devoted yogi, quoting a fellow called Terence McKenna. What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination. Something worth thinking about. Look at this Reuters image of the red glow of the Canada wildfire underneath the Northern Lights, Fort McMurray. Don DeLillo in Underworld, longing on a large scale, makes history. Come back to the reason I'm quoting DeLillo. I like this photograph from The Guardian, Ride Lonesome. And then this is Don DeLillo again in Underworld describing a photograph. A photograph is a universe of dots. The grain, the halide, the little silver things clumped in the emulsion. Once you get inside a dot, you gain access to hidden information. You slide into the smallest event. This is what technology does. It peels back the shadows and redeems the dazed and rumbling past. It makes reality come true. I like this photograph. So sommerlich wird es jetzt in Deutschland. It's very summery. It was today in Germany. My son used to believe that he could look at a plane in flight and make it explode in midair by simply thinking it. You'll have to read the rest of it on Rich Wrap-Ups. That's Don DeLillo's Underworld again. And finally, I like this cartoon that was published by X. Lorenzen of DeLillo. The Australian Prime Minister Turnbull has formally called an election for July the 2nd. This will be keenly watched. Australian elections tend to be very contested because there's no overwhelming majority typically. Fantastic and interesting piece in the New York Times called The Aspiring Novelist Who Became Obama's Foreign Policy Guru. How Ben Rhodes rewrote the rules of diplomacy for the digital age, and it's powerful stuff. Picture him as a young man standing on the waterfront in North Williamsburg at a polling site on September the 11th. He saw the planes hit the towers, an unforgettable moment of sheer disbelief, followed by panic and shock and lasting horror. A scene that eerily reminded him of the aftermath of the cover of the Don DeLillo novel, Underworld. Everything changed that day, but the way it changed Ben Rhodes' life is still unique and perhaps not strictly believable even as fiction. He saw an Arab guy sobbing on the subway. That image has always stayed with me, he says, because I think he knew more than we did about what was going to happen. Boy wonder of the White House is now 38. Here is the president adjusting Rhodes' tie, presenting his darling baby daughter Ella with a flower and smiling wide, while playing with Ella on a giant rug that says E pluribus unum. As the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications, Rhodes writes the president's speeches, plans his trips abroad, and runs communication strategy across the White House. Tasks that taken individually give little sense of the importance of his role. He is, according to the consensus of the 24 current and former White House insiders I talked to, the single most influential voice shaping American foreign policy, aside from POTUS himself. The President and Rhodes communicate regularly, several times a day, adding that he is sure that in addition to the 2 or 3 hours that Rhodes might spend with Obama daily, the two men communicate remotely through the day via email and phone calls. Like Obama, Rhodes is a storyteller who uses a writer's tools to advance an agenda that is packaged as politics, but is often quite personal. He is adept at constructing overarching plot lines with heroes and villains, their conflicts and motivations supported by flurries of carefully chosen adjectives, quotations, and leaks from named and unnamed senior officials. He is the master shaper and retailer of Obama's foreign policy narratives at a time when the killer wave of social media has washed away the sandcastles of the traditional press. That's a key point. His ability to navigate and shape this new environment makes him a more effective and powerful extension of the president's will than any number of policy advisors or diplomats or spies. Part of what accounts for Rhodes' influence is his mind meld with the president. He doesn't think for the president, but he knows what the president is thinking, which is a source of tremendous power. One day when Rhodes and I were sitting in his boiler room office, he confessed with a touch of bafflement, "I don't know anymore where I begin and Obama ends." Standing in his front office before the State of the Union, Rhodes quickly does the political math on the breaking Iran story. Now they'll show scary pictures of people praying to the supreme leader he predicts, looking at the screen. Price turns to his computer and begins tapping away at the administration's well-cultivated network of officials, talking heads, columnists, newspaper reporters, web journalists, outside advocates who can tweet at critics and tweak their stories, backed up by quotations from senior White House officials and spokespeople. I watch the message bounce from Rhodes' brain to Price's keyboard, to the 3 big briefing podiums, the White House, the State Department, and the Pentagon, and across the Twitterverse, where it springs to life in dozens of Insta stories, which over the next 5 hours don formal dress for mainstream outlets. It's a tutorial in the making of a digital news microclimate, a storm that is easy to make these days for a fact of nature, but whose author is sitting next to me right now. That's that very important point. They owned the digital space from the time Obama won the first election. And this is how he's managed to outflank what was a very, very difficult scenario, because Iran, like Cuba, were big rocks that people hadn't tried for decades to get over. What novel is this that you're living in now and will exit from in 8 months and be like, oh my God, I ask him? Who would be the author of this novel, he asks. The one you are a character in now? Don DeLillo, I think, Rhodes answers. I don't know how you feel about Don DeLillo. He's the only person I can think of who has confronted these questions of, the individual who finds himself negotiating both vast currents of history and a very specific kind of power dynamics. That's his milieu, and that's what it's like to work in the US foreign policy apparatus in 2016. Obama tells all his speechwriters to read Lincoln and George Orwell's All Art is Propaganda. He referred to the American foreign policy establishment as the blob. According to Rhodes, the blob includes Hillary Clinton, Robert Gates, and other Iraq war promoters from both parties who now whine incessantly about the collapse of American security order in Europe and the Middle East. Rhodes has become adept at ventriloquizing many people at once. Very interesting. So more and more over the last couple of years, there's been an investment in alternative means of communication, using digital more effectively, going to non-traditional sources, understanding where on each issue your constituencies are going to be found. I think they've approached these major foreign policy challenges as campaign challenges, and they've run campaigns, and those campaigns have been very sophisticated. That's the point. In the narrative that wrote shaped the story of the Iran deal began in 2013 when a moderate faction inside the Iranian regime, led by Hassan Rouhani, beat regime hardliners in an election and then began to pursue a policy of openness which included a newfound willingness to negotiate the dismantling of its illicit nuclear weapons program. And then saying, by applying 21st century data and networking tools to the white glove world of foreign affairs, the White House was able to track what United States senators and the people who worked for them and influenced them were seeing online, and make sure that no potential negative comment passed without a tweet. Saying he's a brilliant guy, obviously. And then talking to Panetta, who was the head of the CIA, and he says, in his own experience, the Pentagon under Obama sometimes resembled being installed in the driver's seat of a car and finding that the steering wheel and brakes had been disconnected from the engine. Put up a photograph of Rhodes during a video conference in the White House Situation Room. And I think, really the thing is, and there's been a lot of pushback on New York Times and other media, that he is a 21st century communications protege. And winning the argument, the Iranian argument in particular, speaks volumes. And he quoted when the president visited Kenya, he said, frankly, we have heard a high demand signal from the US private sector. According to The Economist, that Donald Trump has a solid chance of becoming president. I think he does, saying how fear is trumping hope. I think he has a very big chance. He just needs one serious homeland security event in the run-up to the vote, and I think he'll be in. Mike Kazenko, undisputed winners of the Trump candidacy as the media. Is Hillary a sure thing for the White House? It's not. I think she's the better choice. The question is, can she navigate a big homeland security event if such a thing happens? Visibly emotional Sadiq Khan. I'm so proud that London has today chosen hope over fear and unity over division. I hope we'll never be offered such a stark choice again. Fear doesn't make us safer, it only makes us weaker, and the politics of fear is simply not welcome in our city. Our appalling dog whistle campaign for London Mayor 2016 lost us the election, our reputation and credibility on issues of race and religion, says the Baroness. All we want to do is to come back to our land, to herd the sheep, grow olives and peanuts here. It makes me so sad, but I still can't go back, said Aboud, Syrian. From Pyongyang, we've been listening to Kim speak to Congress for 5 hours and 22 minutes. Can't go anywhere until he's done. But he made an important point, which I'm sure was reflected ever so slightly, but probably not enough, when he said our republic will not use a nuclear weapon unless its sovereignty is encroached upon. And then finally, this concert in Palmyra was a very subtle propaganda effort by the Russians. One side is making music, whilst the other side, of course, chopped heads. Currency markets, the euro is just over 114 at 114.04, dollar index 93.84, Japanese yen is at 107.53, it's become softer, Swissy 0.9713, the pound 144.37, the Aussie, where the election's been called, 0.7369, India rupee 66.435, South Korean won 1163.54, Brazilian real 350.22, the Egyptian pound 887.50, and the rand 14.8235. Having given up a lot of gains, it got very close to 14. The figure dollar index. Have a look at this 3-month chart. The key pivot to the whole thing remains, I'm afraid, 93. And I know we violated it recently. We're back above it, and we should keep an eye on that. I'll put up a 6-month chart of the Aussie dollar. We should expect it to be soft in the run-up to the election, probably get down to 70.50. Dollar Canada, have a look at this 1-year chart. We're currently at 129.14. I think it's a big buy. Commodity markets, gold, last trading at 1281.95, feels strong. I think you buy it on dips. Now, big events happened over the weekend in Saudi Arabia. Holger is calling it the latest coup of the Deputy Crown Prince bin Salman. Saudi Arabia's powerful oil minister, Ali al-Naimi, is fired. Javier Blas posted a photograph of him with the minister. I'll put that up. Ali Naimi said, "During my 7 decades in the industry, I've seen oil at under $2 a barrel and $147 a barrel, and much volatility in between." The new energy minister, Al-Fali, started his first day at the ministry with a selfie with the outgoing Naimi and Prince Faisal. I see this as a bearish development for prices. I got in a number of Twitter conversations over the weekend, so I'll just take some of those. Greg Chajarian asked me, why. I said, I see MBS being in the saddle now, and him turning on the Saudi spigot and doubling down. And I think geopolitical signals indicate this is the way he'll go. You'll remember Yemen, he doubled down there, and I think that's going to be a strategy to put pressure at this point to press his advantage. He's definitely in the saddle. He has folks on the ropes, and geopolitically, he's a double-down merchant. That took me back to the madman strategy of Niccolo Machiavelli, which discusses how it is at times a very wise thing to simulate madness. And I think that's the way we're headed. Bullish. Chinese oil imports rise to near record as teapot refineries buy. That's a bullish sign. I'm bearish, as I said. I think prices are going lower. Look at iron ore, which posted its biggest weekly loss in 5 years last week, dropping 12%. Arab governments are issuing bonds to make up a $900 billion shortfall. Let me put up an image that Holger tweeted to give you an idea. Let's move on to Africa. President Ismail Omar Guelleh was sworn in over the weekend. I did an inside story about Djibouti. That link is on the rich wrap-ups as well. The Chinese envoys visiting Djibouti, which of course is the site of their first overseas base, and is seen as a milestone in the global advance of China's military. And of course, Djibouti sits at the Gate of Tears, the Bab el Mandeb, which is really a choke point of this area. And I said previously that I've no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. And I think part of being in Djibouti gives you a strong geopolitical position. On that note, let me put up a photograph of Ali the navigator who took us to Wasini Island, which is in the Indian Ocean, and another photograph of Pemba Island in Mozambique. Mozambique's tuna fleet is rusting as an African success story fades. 24 fishing boats rusting in the harbour of Mozambique's capital were meant to be a modern tuna fleet. Instead, they've become monuments to government mismanagement and heavy lending by Western banks that has buried a promising African economy in a deep debt crisis. The boats moored in the harbour of Maputo were paid for out of an $850 million loan arranged in 2013 by Credit Suisse and Russia's VTB. Somebody then goes and asks for some tuna. Sorry, sir, we don't have any tuna on the menu. The boats never go out, they are resting. Even when they did sail in Ematum's early days, the fleet never caught the amount of fish that would have been needed over a long period to pay off the debt. Ematum's results published last year pointed to the fleet catching just $450,000 of tuna a year, compared with sales of $18 million forecast at that stage of its life in a 2013 feasibility study circulated by the government. The Medi-Cal has collapsed. Inflation is running at 13%. The debt we've just found out about is a huge burden on the economy. and really it is a disaster. The saddest thing is this country had everything needed to be a huge success story, a diplomat said. Mozambique has gone from hero to zero. When Mozambique was a hero, this was Africa Rising, the conference just 710 days ago. I wrote a piece called Maputo Boomtown in 2012. Took this photograph in 2012 of the sunset in Mozambique. On the Run in Burundi by James Vereni in the New Yorker. Here it's saying, fellow Jean-Marie Ngendayahawa, a former politician, pointed out the fact that Nkurunziza is not an ethnic fanatic, which may make him more dangerous. He can kill anyone. He's always in the rural area playing football. Nkurunziza is known to be a great lover of sport. An ordained pastor. Around the time of the election, he could be found on Sundays preaching at different churches around the country, though not in the capital, which locals say is avoidance. It's a feeble attempt at a coup by a breakaway general last May. It was put down in 2 days, but gave Nkurunziza license to brand the demonstrators insurgents and enemies of democracy. Still, anyone who wants to see him, his ministers, legislators, and even recently a United Nations Security Council delegation must travel to his home in Gitega. The word messianic comes up often in discussions of his psychology. He likes to say that he was chosen by God to lead Burundi. Only assassination can put an end to this. Finally, laments the will of African presidents to hold on to power. It's a kind of sickness, he said. In 2015 in May I wrote about Burundi and I said all eyes on Burundi and spillover risks from debacle loom. South African oil shares up just 1.43% this year. It's fallen back considerably. Dollar rand, let me put up a 6-month chart, I'm a seller here. Egyptian pound, pretty stable. Egyptian EGX 30, which entered a bull market in March, is up 8.07% year to date. Nigerian oil share down 10.27% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down minus 9.71% year to date. From the wiki, as China's power grows, it will not continue to allow the US free reign in East Africa. Have a look at that link if you're interested. Coming to Kenya, Mehdi Hassan from Al Jazeera went head-to-head with Raila Odinga. The link is there again. He said 3 times I've run for president, 2 times I've won, and I've been robbed 2 times, he said. The weather is a wild card was my piece over the weekend. On Saturday night I sat and listened to the torrential downpour. In fact, I found it quite sensual, what with the accompanying crescendo of thunder and lightning, well, until I peered outside my ground floor window and called in Nishet and said, if the velocity is maintained, we're going to be submerged. And then I started to scan social media and noted Nakumatt UK had sunk below the waterline. Of course, the Huruma building collapse was still fresh in my mind, and I cannot help feeling it is a precursor or a harbinger. Did you know the name Nairobi comes from the Maasai phrase Enkari Nairobi, which translates to cool water? The phrase is also the Maasai name of the Nairobi River, which in turn lent its name to the city. The area was essentially uninhabited swamp until a supply depot of the Ugandan Railway was built in 1899. I've always said to Nishet, we're built on rivers, and if rainfall spikes like it is doing now, a whole lot of this city is going to be washed away, and very little distinction is going to be made between Huruma, Westlands or Mzima Springs on the way to Lavington. Over the weekend, we also learned 5 islands have disappeared in the Pacific Solomon Islands due to rising sea levels and coastal erosion, according to an Australian study. The global warming phenomenon is real. It was kind to us in 2015, but I cannot help feeling the phenomenon is set to intensify. The last few days are a powerful signal of where things are headed. Last year, we found ourselves in a sweet spot in the El Niño phenomenon. Whilst farmlands to our north and south were parched, Kenya sat in a sweet spot. Agriculture constitutes 25% of Kenya's GDP, and the diffusion effect means means that when agriculture does well, there is good trickle down. The economy expanded at a 5.6% rate in 2015, according to the KNBS. Agriculture accelerated 6.2% faster than the overall GDP expansion, which is a good sign. And this was because of good weather and abundant rainfall. The governor of the central bank, Patrick Gerogi, said wistfully in a Reuters interview in December, "I wish I could say something about controlling the weather. The weather is now a serious wild card for folks who are parked on riparian land, for the farm economy, and even monetary policy." The historian Sir Stephen Runciman, who once picked me up in a white Rolls Royce, I met him through his Dominion, and was known for having played piano duets with the last emperor of China and twice hit the jackpot on slot machines in Las Vegas, which was what I was really interested in. He was, of course, Byzantine scholar as well. I'm only joking about the Las Vegas thing. The last point, twice hit the jackpot on slot machines in Las Vegas, are the odds, in my opinion, for another similarly benign outcome in 2016 as we had in 2015. And I use that quote from Gerogi. There was an interview which he did on Reuters, and that link is there. Kenya shilling 100.535, 9-month highs. It's a Teflon shilling. Nairobi all share minus 0.06% year to date. Safaricom is going to be reporting full year results Wednesday morning, and that's going to be the key driver of the stock market this week. Have a look at this, a little bit of footage we put together from 2011 to 2016. The share price is up 3.68% year to date and could surge on a good number. I think the market is a little bit bearish in its expectations, and that the man of the moment, Bob Collymore, will outperform market expectations. There was a bit of controversy over the weekend, and Bob said tender barons who lost business are using blackmail. NSE 20 is down 1.88% year to date. The Treasury is awaiting Uchumi bailout proposal. They are willing to accept a stake dilution. Jubilee tops profit list of insurers as Britam comes last, according to Saiton. Once again, thank you for stopping by. It is thoroughly appreciated.